Get started in just a couple of minutes here. Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. I'm hopefully not muted here. Looks like audio is good, and hopefully everyone can see my screen now. All right, so thank you for joining. This is a presentation about cancer-related financial toxicity. We'll talk about how to prevent and manage medical debt and a lot of topics. So my name is Tina Segura, and I'm a staff attorney at the Cancer Legal Resource Center. Just a quick logistical note before we get started here. You will be muted for the duration of this presentation, and the webinar is being recorded. If you haven't used this software before, you can type questions into the question box, and then most likely I will have time at the end versus taking questions throughout. But if I see one pop up on my screen, I may go ahead and answer one. But this webinar is going to be about an hour long. Okay, so what is the CLRC, the Cancer Legal Resource Center? Our mission is to provide information and resources to individuals who have cancer or people who are affected by cancer, patients, survivors, caregivers, healthcare professionals, and anyone else coping with cancer. We're a part of the Disability Rights Legal Center. We're a program of the Disability Rights Legal Center. We provide information and resources in the form of fact sheets on our website. So this should be what our website looks like. Publications and webinars under the Find Legal Information is organized by topic. You can learn all about a lot of different areas of the law. So our resources are free regardless of your income. If you want to review any of the fact sheets or webinars that we have had in the past, they're all on our website. But if you have questions about a specific situation and you think, this is what happened to me, I want to ask someone whether this is legal, I want to know my rights under this law, then you can fill out an online intake, and that is clrcintake.org. If you don't have, well, if you're on this webinar, you have access to the web, but if you have a friend or someone who doesn't have access to the internet and wants to call and have someone else help them fill out the intake, we would then customize some resources for them. Our patient legal handbook is one of the tools we have on our website. It is going to be available, the second version of our patient legal handbook is going to be available soon, this summer. We'll have it in English and Spanish to start with, and then we will also have printed versions of these. If you are a healthcare professional and you want to pre-order some booklets that include a variety of different legal topics and some Cancer in the Law 101, all about employment, health insurance, any of these topics that you see on the screen and more. It's basically we would like to get one of these patient legal handbooks in the hands of everyone diagnosed with cancer so that they understand their rights under the law before they're negatively impacted, because a lot of people don't understand their rights and then are discriminated against or have issues that they're unable to cope with because it's too late. So we want to get these into the hands of everyone. If you want to pre-order some of these materials, don't be shy. Fill out an order form on our website, and anyone will be able to download a PDF version of it for free from our website for individuals, but for healthcare professionals who want to order bulk quantities in like hundreds, you can do that on our website by filling out a pre-order form. So that's coming to is version 2. All right, so moving into the presentation, we have a lot to cover today in one short hour here. And I just want to introduce what cancer-related financial toxicity is. Depending on who you ask, the definition varies, but essentially it's financial-related problems that affect people with cancer over the cost of cancer treatment. Cancer affects your ability to work and pay bills, so it's often caused by the loss of income, and even the best insurance doesn't cover 100% of costs. So a good job with good insurance doesn't always prevent financial toxicity. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, medical debt is the #1 reason for bankruptcy filings in the US. I want to dive right into it. This is going to go kind of quickly because it is meant as an educational overview. My hopes is that whatever you learn about here in a 30-second snippet, hey, here's a fact, that you can contact us about. You can fill out an online intake and ask some personalized questions, or you'll understand, hey, wait, I learned about that. Let me go and read that fact sheet about student loan debt or whatever it may be, and your health insurance appeal or income replacement. So I'm going to talk about ways to cope with or minimize financial toxicity and some of the consumer protections available to you. So that is what we're going to be going over today. Cancer is one of the most expensive medical conditions. Insurance and copays and coinsurance are just one piece of the financial toxicity puzzle. Cancer drugs are often more expensive than those for other conditions. People have to take time off of work. So if a person has multiple cancers or a reoccurrence of cancer, the numbers go even higher. If you want more data on cancer-related financial toxicity, the National Cancer Institute has some published on their website, and that link is here. By the way, this whole presentation is going to be available on our website, if I didn't already mention that in the beginning, and we usually upload them onto our website shortly after the presentation. So you'll be able to see all the slides and hear the recording. So the first topic I want to talk about is health insurance. Obviously, the medical costs are one of the biggest costs related to cancer. The first step in preventing financial toxicity is to have and understand how to use health insurance. Now, I'm going to briefly touch on this, but we have an entire 1-hour webinar dedicated to navigating health insurance that's on our website. So I'll just briefly touch on some of this information. It is our responsibility as individuals to understand health insurance, understand what kind of coverage you have, what your limits are, understand your deductible to help prevent unforeseen cost. So if you don't understand what's supposed to be covered, then you won't know how to appeal if something is denied. You can find out about your policy through your summary plan description or evidence of coverage on your plan's website, or contact your HR department if your plan is an employer-provided one. Just want to touch on some basic terminology to make sure that you understand what these various things mean. Some of this you may already know and some may be surprising. So key terms to understand what insurance costs you might be liable for. A copay, first of all, is a fixed amount that you pay for a covered healthcare service. If your plan covers a visit, you have to be responsible for your copayment, like doctor's office visits, specialist visits, inpatient services all would have a copay. So you want to be familiar with how much that copay is. It's usually like $15 for an office visit and $30 for a specialist or something like that. A deductible, I should have listed this first because this is the amount that you have to pay before insurance even begins to pay anything. If your deductible can be $1,000, it can be $150, it could be $6,000. So you'll want to get familiar with that. You may say, oh, I have insurance through my job, and then go visit a doctor and get a bill for $1,400, and you're wondering what that's all about. Might be that you have a deductible, so you have to pay $1,000 out of pocket before your insurance pays for any covered services. I'm just using 1,000 as an example, but get familiar with what your deductible is. You'll have to pay that every year before your plan starts to pay anything. Coinsurance, because insurance doesn't cover 100% of every cost. After you meet your deductible, you pay your coinsurance. It's usually a percentage of the cost, could be 20%. So if your insurance pays 80% and you pay 20%, that's your coinsurance. You pay that part of the cost of the visit. And then prior authorization is something I had to mention because it's important to know whether your insurance makes you get pre-authorization for any sort of service. Usually really expensive services require prior authorization. If you need an MRI or CT, that just means your doctor has to contact the insurance company and say, hey, my patient needs this service, it's medically necessary. Doesn't mean it's going to be covered for sure, but it helps if you need to appeal. And then I'll talk a little bit about this, I think, no, maybe not, but just even though most medical services require you to meet your deductible, coinsurance, and copay, there are certain preventive services that must be covered without needing to have met those. Certain screenings and immunizations under the Affordable Care Act don't require you to have met your deductible. And then if you don't have health insurance or you're thinking about changing your health insurance, it's coming up to that time of year, or if you've lost your job or your spouse has lost their job or you're about to turn 26, let's say you're shopping for new insurance for whatever reason, just want to be aware to look for all possible, consider everything, not just the. A lot of people think about just the monthly premium. Oh, that's too expensive each month. I can't afford that. And while that is unfortunately true for a lot of people, consider what your out-of-pocket costs may be. If you pick a plan with a lower monthly premium, although you can't afford the monthly premium, can you afford to pay, let's say, 40% of medical costs instead of 10%? So just to explain, health insurance plans on the marketplace might be organized by metal categories: silver, bronze, platinum, gold. The bronze plans, the lower tier of metal, insurance company pays 60% of costs and you pay 40% of costs. This is outside of your monthly premium for the plan. And then for platinum plans, the more expensive monthly premium, the insurance company pays 90% of costs where you pay 10% of costs. So just consider that, compare all your options, think about what your co-pays, what your deductible will be, what your share of the cost will be. And then not just cost, but also consider when you're shopping for insurance, if you want an HMO or PPO. If you have a choice, don't just look at the monthly premium again, but consider that HMOs have a smaller network. You usually have limited choices, which is why they're less expensive than a PPO, which is a preferred provider organization. So if you want to get treatment at certain facilities, make sure you consider the network and find out which medical professionals accept which insurance, because that is going to determine whether you have to see certain doctors. All right. Aside from marketplace insurance, which I'll talk about in a second, if you are going to take some time off of work, or you're going to lose your job, or your spouse is, and you need health insurance, COBRA, which is the Consolidated Omnibus Reconciliation Act, allows you to get continuation of coverage if you work for an employer of 20 or more employees. It just allows you to keep your same insurance. It's expensive, but it may make sense for some people because it allows them to get the treatment that they need without having to switch doctors and switch insurance and that whole situation. And you have 60 days to elect COBRA. And then COBRA ends after 18 or 36 months, or if you become eligible for Medicare after you get COBRA, or if your employer stops providing health coverage. So, and then some states have similar laws to COBRA that apply to smaller employees. So if you can be eligible for COBRA if you meet certain requirements, but you can be eligible for COBRA if you lose your employer-sponsored coverage for any reason except for gross misconduct. So again, as I mentioned, these are going to be very short introductions to certain laws that you can absolutely contact us or view our website for more information about. But then other options for health insurance coverage, if COBRA's really expensive and that doesn't seem like a feasible option, you can buy individual health insurance on the state marketplace. You enter in your information on healthcare.gov, and if your state has its own marketplace, you'll be redirected to your state's marketplace where they sell different insurance plans. And then you can shop around, consider the things I talked to you about. What are the networks of doctors? What are not just the monthly premium costs, but what are your cost sharing on the various plans? And if you start applying for state marketplace, you enter in your income, and it turns out you're low enough income to qualify for Medicaid. Medicaid is a huge topic. I'm not going to go into great detail, but essentially it's federal government provided health insurance for people who are low income, and it is run by the states. So you'll need to check your state Medicaid agency to find out which Medicaid programs they have, how to be eligible. There are two traditional ways of being eligible for Medicaid. You're either low income plus have a disability or other qualifying reason to be eligible for Medicaid. And then recently, well, not so recently, but under the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid was expanded in certain states, meaning that you don't have to have any sort of link. If you're just low income, you can qualify for Medicaid in certain states. So again, it depends on your state. You'll have to check with the Medicaid agency in your state. And then Medicare is available for people who are 65 or older, or have had SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, for 24 months. So those are ways to get Medicare, and we have a 1-hour Medicare webinar that we recently did. So you can see that on our website for more information. But just don't be without health insurance, because that is one of the biggest costs. If you have health insurance and you're denied coverage for anything, don't take no for an answer. Most people will know sort of what's covered, but if you've reviewed your policy very carefully, then you should understand what things are covered by your insurance and how much you're supposed to be responsible for, so that you know when to flag something and when to appeal and say, hey, wait, my insurance said they would cover this. What's up with that? Then you can appeal any denial of coverage by your insurance. So most people know they can appeal, because when you get a letter that says, sorry, your insurance is not covering this, here's information on how to appeal this denial. But what a lot of people aren't aware of is it doesn't have to end there. If you appeal with your insurance company and they still deny coverage, you can file an external appeal. Now, I'm talking about private health insurance. That means an employer health insurance or insurance from the state marketplace. You can do an external appeal, meaning you can ask an outside company. Your insurance company should let you know how you go about that. But basically, if you have an urgent medical issue and you're waiting for an approval from your insurance company to get treatment, that would be urgent. And then you don't have to go through your insurance company first. But in most cases, what you do is you file the appeal with your insurance company and then wait for them to deny it. If they deny it, you can file an external appeal, otherwise known as an independent medical review. But if your issue is urgent, you can do both at the same time. Ask your insurance company and the external appeal place. So most states, in all states, you have the right to an insurance appeal, an external appeal, but the way to go about it depends by state. So we have some information also on our website about a step-by-step guide to insurance appeals that explains this more in detail if you want to look at that fact sheet. And then your medical team can help you appeal, or if it's something that you've gone through all the appeals process and you're just not getting anywhere, talk to your medical team. The folks that you saw that provided you the service that was denied by the insurance company, they might have some other ideas of how to save you money if your insurance ultimately doesn't pay. If you have Medicaid or Medicare, I'll show you some contact information later on, but you'll contact the agency to find out how to go about appeals, because those processes are different. And then if your insurance has a case manager or patient navigator, then great. It's nice to have someone to be your go-to person to talk to. But if you don't have a case manager or patient navigator at your insurance company, then be sure to ask for the same person. You can ask someone for their last name or employee number. Try to contact the same person. It's nice to just have that. If you absolutely can't, just keep accurate records, dates, times, names of people you talk to, employee numbers, extension numbers. Put everything in writing so that you know who you talk to and when, because sometimes that information does become necessary. If you say, hey, wait, but someone from your company told me, they might ask you who. If you're required to get pre-authorization from your insurance to get a certain service, then ask for that in writing, because sometimes you might need that. Your insurance company might say, well, you needed to get prior authorization, and you might have to show them that you did. And then you'll have to review all your medical bills. As daunting as that may seem, billing mistakes do happen, so I'll talk about some of that. I mentioned it's important to have health insurance. That is pretty common sense. But if you can't get health insurance for whatever reason, a lot of people, due to immigration status or for whatever other reason, cannot get health insurance. They fall through the cracks. There's a lot of laws that came into play to help people, but there's still a lot of gaps, and people fall through the cracks and don't get covered. So if you need health insurance and you can't get it, you can always go to the insurance company or a broker and buy insurance directly from an insurance company. It could be really expensive because there's no tax credits for that, like on the state marketplace, but that's one option that some people elect. And then Hill-Burton is a law that gave hospitals and other health facilities some money for construction and modernization. And the facilities that received those funds then had to be obligated to provide free or reduced cost care to a certain amount of patients. Well, the money stopped being provided, but the facilities are still obligated to provide that free care or low-cost care. So call the national hotline to ask about a list of facilities, or if you live in Maryland, there's a separate number. All right, so that's Hilberton. And then most hospitals should have a low-cost or charity care provision for low-income patients. If you get treatment at a hospital, always ask to speak to the patient services or a patient navigator to determine what options might be available to you. And then I'll bring up fundraising on a later slide, but that is sometimes an option to pay for medical care. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about job and income protection. And again, I'm just going to briefly go over this so that you know there are protections, but I'm not using this presentation to go into too much detail. Because cancer requires time off to heal, for treatment, even family members need to stay home from work and take people to medical appointments that can be lengthy or help do things around the house. Job protection is important. So if you have a job and need to take medical leave for yourself or for a family member, FMLA is one of those laws. The Family Medical Leave Act doesn't apply to everyone. Certain government entities and private employers with 50 or more employees in a 75-mile radius have to provide FMLA. Some employers provide FMLA in a sense. They have it built into their employee policy that you get medical leave similar to FMLA. So now you know what FMLA is. It's unpaid but job protected leave, which means that if you qualify, you can take up to 12 weeks of time off and come back to your same job with your same pay and benefits after that 12 weeks. Now that's not a whole lot of time for someone with cancer, but it's something. That's your unpaid job protected time off. You have to have worked for the company for 12 months and have worked at least 1,250 hours in the last year. So that's one job protection. The other job protection I wanted to bring up is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prevents job discrimination, and it applies to people who have a disability and work for a private employer of 15 or more employees or certain government entities. Under the ADA, if you have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a daily life activity, that's what a disability refers to. And you have to be a qualified employee and be able to do the essential functions of your job. So it applies to people who work for a private employer of 15 or more employees. And then sometimes there are state laws that are very similar. In some states, they expand the definition of disability to specifically include cancer. In other states, they expand the amount of companies that have to abide by the state anti-discrimination law. So the federal law says you have to work for an employer of 15 or more employees and have a qualifying disability to be protected from discriminatory action. So you can't be fired because you have cancer if you qualify for the ADA protection. And under state law, sometimes if you work for an even smaller employer, then you can qualify for job protection. So you can contact the CLRC or view our website if you have more questions about job protection. There's a whole webinar that we did on this recently too. And then just want to quickly touch on income replacement. Social Security provides long-term disability pay if you need to miss some time off of work. And again, it's for long-term time off if you have a disability and are unable to work due to your medical condition. Then you can apply for either SSDI or SSI. SSDI is Social Security Disability Insurance. Think of it as insurance because you've paid into the system. So if you've had enough work credits, you can go on the SSA.gov website and find out whether you have enough work credits to get SSDI. Then that is for if you have a disability that's expected to last 12 months or more, or have a condition that's expected to result in death. Cancer doesn't unfortunately mean automatic approval in every instance, but if you have a condition that's on the compassionate allowances list, you might get quicker review of your file. It can take months to review these applications. So if you have a disability you think is going to last 12 months or more and you're unable to work based on that disability, apply right away. And some states have their own disability program for short-term disability usually. It can be up to a year in some states. Very few states have a state disability program because the idea is, oh wait, you don't have private disability insurance. So obviously not everyone does, but some states are provide for their citizens who have a disability that's not going to last 12 months, but a shorter term. And then some states also protect their, some states also offer paid family leave, which protects families of people with disabilities in that they offer pay if family members need to take time off. Now, always look at the definition of family member because it varies. You may be able to get paid time off up to a certain amount of time if you need to stay home from work because your family member has a disability, spouse or child or parent. And then private disability, if you're offered disability insurance through a job or you buy one on your own. That's what I mean by private disability insurance, whether short or long term. And if you're going to file a claim for disability insurance, be sure to understand that the definition of disability varies by plan. So you have to read the policy to understand when you would be qualified for disability insurance through a private company. And if you don't have disability insurance and you want to buy a plan, you can be denied or charged more because of a pre-existing condition, because the Affordable Care Act that says no discrimination for people with pre-existing condition only applies to health insurance, not disability insurance. All right, moving right along here. I want to talk, this next part, I want to talk about what to do with debt. We've learned that first you need to understand your health insurance, well, have health insurance or some sort of income, and then understand your health insurance and know how to use it and appeal so that you don't have to be on the hook for medical debt. Well, sometimes medical debt is unavoidable because certain things aren't covered or people just aren't in a financial place to pay their medical bills. So what do we do then? This is what the next portion of this will be about. I'm going to go over some information that should guide you: consumer protection laws, billing, financing, student loan debt, bankruptcy. And again, all of these things that I'm bringing up on our bringing up on this webinar are things that we have on our website or things that you can ask us questions about on an intake. Without further ado, so what do you do if you get a medical bill? First of all, if you get it, make sure that you owe everything on there. Hang on for just 1 second. Okay. If you get a medical bill, make sure that you owe whatever's on that medical bill. You know what your insurance should cover and what they should be paying, so make sure that bill is in line with what you know about your insurance. If you think there's an issue with something, contact the creditor, contact the person who sent you the medical bill. Request that your bill be put on hold from collections. Just say, hey, I don't want my bill to go into collections. Please put my bill on hold. Then you want to request what's called a line item or detailed bill, especially for hospital bills. That will detail every single charge down to the amount of aspirin you were given. Then you request your medical records for your hospital stay. You have the right to see and review your medical records. If you had to stay at a hospital and you have a big medical bill, definitely review your medical records and compare that with the bill. Does everything match up? Does everything on the bill look like it was something that you ordered, something that you received? Were you charged for anything, any take-home items that you didn't receive, like crutches or a brace or anything like that? Look for duplicate charges. Look for upcoding. What do I mean by upcoding? That's when a provider upcodes or bills for a more costly procedure than was actually performed. Sometimes they will bill for a more expensive procedure to get paid more by the insurance. That is not okay. Look for duplicate charges. If you see something on there twice, or if your physician didn't order every single thing on that bill in writing, then you are not liable for it. And you'll want to dispute anything on the medical bill that you disagree with. You'll dispute it in writing, and there are several companies that can help you with the medical dispute letter, but essentially you just want to document why you shouldn't pay for something, put your account numbers, dates, physician name, code numbers, and then if you have looked for any errors, now you want to see if the hospital is being fair in its pricing. And where it says on this slide, compare rates for procedure, some of these companies actually put a list of like the Healthcare Blue Book is a list of different procedures and how much they should cost. So you can use those things to negotiate rates, just like you would if you went to a mechanic and you said, hey, but all these people are charging this much for an alternator. I don't think I should have to pay you that much. You can try and use that to negotiate and get your bill reduced. You could always file a complaint if with the Department of Insurance or your state Department of Health if the hospital is just stonewalling you. And then if you need help, there are medical billing advocates. I guess that's on the end of the presentation. I have a list of medical billing advocates that I'll include in the end. There are people who do this professionally. You'll want to shop around and find a place that will offer you like a free consult at the very least. So there are medical billing issues, and then there are medication issues. Sometimes people can't get their medicine covered, or they talk about why their medicine is so expensive. So there are a lot of reasons for that, and this is just an introduction to some reasons why your medication might be expensive and what you can do. First of all insurance companies have a drug formulary, a medication drug formulary. That is, they have a list of medications that they'll cover and at what percentage. So they're sort of in steps or tiers. And so a generic drug might be in a lower tier, meaning it comes out cheaper to you. And brand name medication, cancer medication, unfortunately, are in the higher tier often, which means that the insurance company pays less, you pay more out of pocket. So always ask for a copy of your insurance's drug formulary. That way, if you're prescribed something that's not on the formulary, maybe you can ask your doctor if there's something similar that is on the formulary or on a different tier. If you have issues getting a certain medication paid for, your doctor's office might have pharmacies that they're partnered with to help you get coupons or get your medication paid for. Also, insurance companies sometimes require patients to do what's called step therapy, meaning first you try the cheaper drug and we'll pay for that. Then your doctor writes us a letter and says, this didn't work, so now I need you to try this next more expensive medication. And then finally, the super expensive medication. So that is what step therapy is. You have to demonstrate you tried a certain medication, have your doctor say it didn't work before your insurance will cover a certain medication. Unfortunately, that is how some insurance companies work. And then you can appeal if you think your insurance company should have covered a certain medication. I want to talk about balance billing. So just so that you understand what this is, balance billing. Some people think that if your health insurance pays your medical provider, that means your insurance company has just paid the whole cost of what your care was. Not the case. If a provider accepts your health insurance or accepts assignment from Medicare, the provider has agreed to be paid whatever the insurance company says they'll pay. So for example, let's say a doctor charges, I'm going to just use a round number, $500 for a certain visit, and they accept your insurance. Your insurance company says, we pay you $300. How about that? Okay, the provider says, $300 it is. Now, what they can't do is accept $300 from your insurance company and then bill you for the $200 that remain of that $500, if that makes sense. So that's balance billing. If your insurance company if your provider accepts your insurance company or accepts assignment from Medicare, they cannot bill you for the balance of what they would normally get. If they accept your provider's agreed rate, that means they've decided to accept it in full and they have to stick to that. Now, if you go outside of your insurance network or get some non-covered services, then there's no obligation because there is no contract between that other provider and your insurance. So if you go in network and your provider has decided to accept your insurance, they cannot bill you for the balance. But if they don't have a contract with your insurance and they're out of network, they can bill you for the balance. What is uncommon but is happening sometimes is surprise balance billing. This is what I want to talk about for just a moment. Obviously, you're familiar with your policy. You make sure your providers are in network because you don't want to be balance billed. What's happening now is people are going to hospitals because they need care or they're getting a surgery. Let's say you pick out your surgeon, you know they're in network, and then you get a surprise bill because the anesthesiologist was out of network. That has to be illegal. Not the case. Unfortunately, there are no explicit federal protections against this type of balance billing where you go to a surgeon, they're in network, but they used an out-of-network anesthesiologist or something. That's not illegal federally, but some states have stepped in to protect consumers, and it is illegal under some state laws. But the extent to which it's illegal and what that actually means for consumers varies by state. So some states have what's called hold harmless laws that requires insurers only just to hold you harmless from the billed charges of providers, meaning you wouldn't have to pay, but you could still be billed. So these providers will say, all right, let me bill this person, even though there's a hold harmless provision in this state. I'm going to bill this patient and just see if they pay. Maybe they don't know about this hold harmless provision. So that's happening. So check with your Department of Insurance to find out whether there are any consumer protection laws. If you do get a surprise bill from a provider who used an out-of-network partner physician or something. So that applies to state health insurance plans, not self-insured plans, which are regulated by federal law. So again, no consistency across the board. There's some consumer protections, but not much. What we are finding out too is that hospitals are pressuring people to say, hey, we got this lender who will offer you this great rate if you take out a loan for what you're going to owe us for this service. And there was an article in a Kaiser Health News that hospitals are starting to ask patients while they're still in the hospital bed and they can't do due diligence. So you will want to make sure you do due diligence. Take your take your hospital bill and this proposal home with you, have someone review whatever it is that you're being offered by the hospital, because you want to take your time and review everything. If you're offered a credit card by a hospital, some medical credit cards say 0% financing for 18 months, but can you pay off that credit card in 18 months? Think about your budget and what's realistic, because sometimes the interest rate will go all the way up to 26% or something that will make it nearly impossible to pay off. So if you are offered some sort of financing by a hospital or medical facility, consider it carefully, even if they're pressuring you and saying, all right, sign this today because we have to do this service, agree to this loan. Take your time, bring it home, have someone help you look at it if you can't, and just consider your options carefully. And then fundraising, GoFundMe and these other online fundraising tools are becoming very popular. Not to discourage anyone from doing that, but just to prevent any really bad implications, I have to warn you, they can count this cash that you receive on any of these online fundraisers can count as income for certain charitable programs, whether it's charitable care at a hospital, Medicaid, SSI. Check with the program heads, either the agency, through SSI or Medicaid, or check with the patient navigator at the hospital if you're receiving charity care, because you might end up, that might end up being held against you and counted as income. And it could disqualify you from, so your friends might set up a GoFundMe and have the money come to your name, but if you're getting charitable services or low income recipient benefits, you could be disqualified from that fundraising money. An alternative option that you might want to consider if this is an option that you're thinking about is see if people will pay your medical bills directly. Put an ask for people to contact you to pay your medical bills directly. Again, you'll want to check and make sure that doesn't disqualify you, but often it's less common to be disqualified if you have someone pay your medical bills or pay your any sort of in-kind support that isn't a cash gift. So just be sure you check into that before accepting cash gifts. If you have some debt that has gone to a debt collector, so real quick, a creditor is someone who extends you credit, whether it's a hospital, doctor, medical provider, credit card company. That's your creditor, the person or company you initially borrowed money from. If you have a bill that's with a creditor, that's your original creditor, then these consumer protection laws that I'm about to discuss don't apply to that. These consumer protection laws that I want to discuss real quick are for if your bill is not able to be paid and the creditor who gave you the credit at first gives your debt to an attorney or a debt collector. Debt collectors are required to follow certain rules when they're trying to collect debt from you. And this is under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. It's a federal law that protects consumers from harassment and unfair practices. So basically, on the slide here, these are some things that debt collectors are required to do. They're required to disclose that they're debt collectors. They can't use some secret identity. They can't harass you. They can't call at inconvenient times like before 8 in the morning or after 9 p.m. So they can't make false threats. If they don't intend to sue you, they can't threaten to sue you. I'll talk about lawsuits soon, but you can't be harassed by a debt collector. If you have debt, just make sure, whether it's, I talked about medical debt, medical billing a great deal in a couple slides ago, but if you're faced with a bill you owe, regardless of who it's from, regardless if it's medical debt, you can try to negotiate, But first, learn about the debt. Check your credit. If your bill is in collections, check your credit. See if the amount that's on your credit actually is accurate. Request proof of what you owe. It's good to do so in writing. Um, if someone's calling you, ask who they are, ask them for an address, ask them for proof that you owe this bill, and double check it. Does it match what's on your credit? Does it match what you think you owe? Finally, if it seems legit, you can always try to negotiate. Oftentimes they'll do better if you offer to pay it off in a lump sum. And then you can dispute the debt if you don't think you owe it. And debt collection lawsuits. So when do you have to worry about your wages being garnished? Let's say you know you owe a huge amount or even some small amount, and you wonder, am I gonna lose my home? Is there gonna be a lien on my home or a levy on my bank account? Or are my wages going to be garnished? Well, you have to be sued first in order to have your wages garnished. Not only do you have to be sued, so the debt has to be legitimate, and the creditor or debt collector has to sue you within a certain time limit. There's a statute of limitations in every state that limits how old the debt can be before you're sued. So they have to act within a certain time frame. And then you have to have a judgment entered against you. A judge has to decide, yes, this person owes the money, here's a judgment, you can begin to collect that money. There are laws. The Consumer Credit Protection Act limits wage garnishment. So how much of your wages can be garnished if you are sued and if a judgment is entered against you? It depends. Wages can be garnished up to 25% of your disposable earnings. So I'll include a slide at the end here, the FTC website, that shows the calculation that's used to determine what 25% of your disposable earnings are. But essentially, it's a creditor's limited to 25% of your disposable earnings above $290 a week. And then certain wages are exempt. So if you get SSI, veterans benefits, federal retirement, disability benefits, some other things are exempt from wage garnishment, meaning those wages can't be garnished under this law. You could be judgment proof. What I mean by that is if you fall within a certain income limit, you could be exempt from wage garnishment. The law has already determined these individuals can't be sued. We're not entering a judgment against them. Their wages can't be garnished. And then just to note, if you have child support or spousal support debt, that's not subject to the same limitations. Your wages could be garnished 50 or 60% if you owe those debts. If you owe debt that you can't repay and need to file bankruptcy, talk to an attorney about Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. Most people go in looking for Chapter 7, the complete discharge, complete liquidation of bankruptcy, but not everyone qualifies for that bankruptcy. So if you have enough income that the judge determines, hey, you can repay a portion of your debt, you might want to file Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Again, you'll have to talk to an attorney to determine whether this is a good option for you, fully consider the implications. Yes, it stays on your credit for a long time, but some people are extended credit shortly after filing. So it depends on the situation when it's a good idea and when it's not. And then keep in mind that not everything can be discharged in bankruptcy. So if you have student loans, that's usually not the primary reason people file for bankruptcy. I'll talk about that in a second. But certain things are never discharged in bankruptcy, like court fines or restitution that you owe, child support. And then sometimes student loans and tax debts are not dischargeable in bankruptcy unless you ask for an exemption and you're granted that exemption. So because student loans are usually not dischargeable in bankruptcy, what options are there if you absolutely can't pay your student loans? Depending on whether you have federal or private student loans, then your options vary. TPD discharge is total and permanent disability discharge. And these 3 ways that I've listed on the screen are 3 ways to qualify for TPD discharge. Essentially, if you have a disability, if you're receiving SSI or SSDI, you have to send in a form that says, well, Social Security is not going to review my case for another 5 to 7 years. In that case, the total permanent disability discharge program has determined, okay, this person is long-term disability and they qualify. Or your physician certifies that you have a condition that's expected to result in death or not less than 60 continuous months of being unable to work. So if you have federal student loans, you could qualify for this. This is not a program for private student loans. If you have private student loans, well, with private or federal, you should contact the lender first right away if you're unable to make your payments, because just being delinquent is going to be a bad mark on your credit. But they might be able to come up with something creative like deferment or forbearance or some other options. Some people ask us about early withdrawal from a retirement account. If you withdraw money before the age of 59 and a half, you're likely going to be subject to an additional tax besides being subject to income tax. If you want to withdraw money from an IRA or 401k early before you turn 59 and a half, this is called a premature or early distribution. And the IRS discourages that by implementing a penalty. So I'm not going to talk about every situation because everyone's circumstances is so unique. But there are exceptions for when you don't have to pay that extra 10%. And sometimes if you have enough medical expenses, if you're under, hold on, if you're under 65, you have to have enough unreimbursed medical expenses that it exceeds 10% of your adjusted gross income. And then there are disability related exceptions as well. So if you're unable to work, if you're buying a home, you might be eligible for penalty-free distributions. And one other final consumer protection warning here. I went to this all-day event recently that talked about insurance in the sharing economy through this wonderful organization called Consumer Action. And I just couldn't leave this out of the presentation. If you are renting out your home or driving for Uber or Lyft or any of these car or home sharing platforms, and you're trying to make a little extra cash, be careful and make sure that your home insurance or your car insurance is going to cover you should something happen. I talked about the importance of insurance in healthcare, but because of a lot of the worst case scenarios I've seen, I now know that insurance is important for everything. So just to not be on the hook or not lose your insurance, if you rent out a room in your home for money, or you drive your car and pick up passengers for money, this is now considered a business and you're making income. You will want to disclose that to your homeowner's insurance or to your car insurance, because if you don't disclose it and something happens, then your insurance might cancel your policy. And if you really need it, you could be on the hook for a lot of money that could be just catastrophic. So please, please, please review your policy and make sure you understand what you're covered if you should need to rent out a room and list it on Airbnb or VRBO. Check your homeowner's policy. You can always get an endorsement for relatively cheap to insure your home or your guest should something happen in order to protect you from a lawsuit or protect you from losing your insurance. So that's just a quick warning. All right, we've gone over a lot. Thank you for hanging in there. This is a recap of everything that we've talked about today. So again, please check our website to see, we have information about everything that I brought up here. We have some resources if you need more information about anything that I've brought up in this presentation, but we did go through a lot. So thank you for your patience. We have a lot of webinars on our website. So I'm going to just fly through these next couple of slides. Feel free to start asking questions. Type them in the question box. I only have a couple of minutes, so I'll do my best to get to everyone's questions. But I am going to stay on a little bit after. And then I'm going to flip through these slides. Everything's going to be, this whole webinar is recorded, so it's all going to be on our website. So that's why I wanted to include these resources so that you can flip through and say, hey, where do I find out more information about Medicare? Where do I find out more information about Medicare appeals? Or how do I get a Social Security appeal? Where do I get an attorney for Social Security? What are some medical billing resources? I'm including all these slides so that you have that information. I just want to go through them really quick. This is the website where I talked about the fair debt collection practices. Here are some companies that do medical billing. They'll comb through people's medical bills and help people out with that. This is another good organization that does medical billing. We don't endorse any of these companies. These are just companies that we are aware of that offer some case management and specific resources to help with medical bills. If there's a debt collector harassing you or you're worried about a lawsuit or wage garnishment, this is more information about that. And then if you need to find a lawyer, here's how to do so. So someone asked whether there is a list of states that provide disability and paid family leave. There isn't a reliable website that has a list of them, but if you live in a state and want to know if your state provides disability or paid family leave, please fill out an online intake on the CLRC. Again, it's free. And we'll do some research and we can let you know if your state has a state disability program or paid family leave. Someone had asked the question whether if you qualify for compassionate allowances, do you receive cash benefits sooner? There is still a waiting period to receive SSDI. So this isn't the income replacement webinar, so I didn't go into much detail about that. But compassionate allowances, if you go on the Social Security website, the compassionate allowances list does have a list of conditions that will make your application be reviewed sooner. All it means is that your application will be reviewed in days as opposed to months, not that you will get paid sooner. Someone asked whether where the best place to start when dealing with debt created by cancer. You know, if you have some debt, it's always best to consult with a professional, especially if you have multiple different types of debt, because everybody's situation is so unique. If I started saying this is the best thing to do, I would be doing you a huge disservice, because everyone does have a unique circumstance, and what makes sense to one person might not make sense to another person. Legal aid organizations often help people apply for government benefits, food stamps, SSI. They can help with appeals. So our website has a list of organizations that offer free financial assistance. That changes so often. The American Cancer Society in some places offers transportation assistance. So the best place to start, to me, seems like receiving income, making sure you're getting all the income that you are entitled to or can get. And then when dealing with debt, consult a professional. If you have a home or a car or anything that's secured that can be taken away if you don't pay the bills, that might be a good way to start prioritizing. If you have a medical condition such as cancer, making sure that your insurance premiums are paid, prioritizing, and using the Patient Advocate Foundation and other medical billing programs that exist. There are a lot of free nonprofits in the world of cancer. A lot of people want to help, so just reaching out to different organizations. If one organization can't help, they might have referrals to another. So you can always contact us if you need referrals to a certain type of legal issue. You can contact us. So someone asked whether copays would go toward the deductible. If you have a deductible, let's say that amount is $500, you wouldn't pay, okay, so let's say you have a deductible that's $500 and you have to go to a doctor. This doctor normally charges a $30 copay because it's a specialist. So you wouldn't go and only be responsible for your $30 copay when you go into the office. You would be responsible for the cost of the visit. So if that visit is $178, you would pay that $178 towards the visit because you haven't met your $500 deductible yet. So basically you'd pay out of pocket until you meet your deductible. That's kind of how it works. Someone asked if your SDI, which is your state disability insurance, if that is exhausted and you're not able to apply for SSDI early, are there any other benefits you're entitled to so that you have income while waiting for review? SSDI and SSI are both long-term disability programs. So that means you are paid that disability insurance if you have a disability that's expected to last 12 months or more, and there's a waiting period if you want SSDI. If you want SSI, there's no waiting period, so a lot of people apply for both and get SSI while they wait for their SSDI to kick in. If you have specific questions about that, you can fill out an online intake and we can give you some customized information about it. But essentially, if people can't get SSDI for several months because there is a waiting period, they'll often apply for SSI, and depending on your income, you could get SSI while you're waiting for SSDI. And then back to the previous question that was asked, if you have a doctor's visit and you haven't yet met your deductible, you will pay out of pocket until you meet that deductible. And then once you have met the deductible, you go to just paying your co-pays and co-insurance depending on what your plan charges. So yes, once you meet your deductible, then you're responsible for your cost sharing, which is your co-pay, your co-insurance, and things like that. So you'll want to review your policy to see what visits are charged, what amount, and whether they are co-pays or co-insurance, and fully understand that. So unfortunately, we have run out of time. I do see there were several other questions asked. Please, if your question was not answered here, please fill out an online intake with the CLRC. That's clrcintake.org, and that is here on the screen. And we can take some time and fully answer your question if it hasn't been answered here. So thank you for your attendance. I'm going to be ending the webinar. It will be up on our website. I don't know an exact date, but please check back on our website. Thank you.